Welcome to the One Year Book of Mormon. A non-Mormon reads through the Book of Mormon. Mosiah 28, chapter overview. This is nearing the end of the book of Mosiah, and we get a sort of finishing up chapter that leads into the next book, the Book of Alma. We're told that the sons of Mosiah, now thoroughly reformed from their wickedness, had a burning evangelistic desire to go back to the land of Nephi and preach to the Lamanites, so that they also might be saved and have eternal life. And we're told that we will have an account of that hereafter. We're also told that Mosiah did translate the plates that Limhi brought, that he translated them by means of basically magic eyeglasses, two stones which were fastened into the two rims of a bow, here called the interpreters, and that the plates contain an account of a people that came to the Americas after the Tower of Babel, which, like the Book of Alma, we will read at some point in the future. Finally, we're told that Mosiah's sons all declined the kingship, and also that Mosiah took all the records plus the interpreters and gave them to the younger Alma, telling him to preserve and keep them, and to add to it and pass it down to the generations. Verse 3 reinforces the idea that if a person dies in sin, that his soul will go to hell forever. Now they were desirous that salvation should be declared to every creature, for they could not bear that any human soul should perish. Yea, even the very thoughts that any soul should endure endless torment did cause them to quake and tremble. Mormons typically don't cite passages like these from the Book of Mormon, and since most non-Mormons have never read the Book of Mormon, they don't realize how strong the Book of Mormon is on this point. But if the eternality of hell is ever brought up to a Mormon, typically from the Bible, if the Mormon responds at all, he will usually say something about hell being only temporarily eternal. Of course, that won't be the words used, but that will be the basic argument. It's something like the punishment being eternal, in that it lasts as long as the person is in hell, but that once the person is removed from hell, by which he means spirit prison, he is no longer being punished. It took some time, but I finally came up with an analogy to explain what their view seems to be as far as I can understand it. If we think of a pizza oven that is continually running at 500 degrees Fahrenheit, in that sense, it's eternally at 500 degrees, and the fire is eternal. It keeps the temperature forever. But the pizzas themselves are only subjected to that eternal temperature for the time that they're being cooked. Then they're taken out at the end. Yet, how can endless torment have an end? That is the question a Mormon must answer from his own scriptures and beliefs. I cannot answer it, for it seems to be a complete contradiction of the very word endless. Verse 13 speaks of something called interpreters, which are two stones which are fastened into the rims of a bow. To me, it sounds like magic eyeglasses, because elsewhere we are told that a man can look in them or perhaps through them and thus translate. There are some early Mormon claims and or folklore that these were what Joseph Smith used to translate. Of course, we have no actual witness testimony from the scribes or anyone else that this was the case. We only have testimony of the rock and a hat method of interpretation, and some hints that sometimes Joseph Smith was separated from his scribe by a sheet, which means Joseph Smith could have read directly from the Bible or perhaps a prepared manuscript without the scribe's knowledge. Though the typical Mormon claim is that the sheet separated not Joseph Smith from his scribe, but Joseph Smith with his scribe from others. Anybody who might be passing by or popping into the house without warning. Still, I think that at the time the Book of Mormon was written, these translators were intended to be the object through which Joseph Smith would claim to be able to translate the Book of Mormon. I think I remember reading that Joseph Smith supposedly found the gold plates with these interpreters and was told that that's how they would be interpreted. But we know that that isn't the case, because we know he translated them through the rock and a hat method, and he had had that rock for years. Indeed, the LDS Church specifically and deliberately downplayed the rock and a hat method, commissioning pictures of Joseph Smith studiously examining the gold plates and writing the translation from them himself. Verse 17 has a minor difference between the 1830 and modern Book of Mormon in the last phrase of the verse, with the word back used twice in the verse in the modern, but only once in the 1830. It's not really a change due to error in the 1830, but is actually just a clarification. The explanation is the word until typically is forward-looking, that is, from time X going forward to time Y. But here it's backwards looking, or going in reverse from time Y going backwards to time X in the past. However, because of the length of the sentence, it's easy to forget the first back, or the only back in the 1830 version, so it's perfectly valid to add it again for clarification in the most correct book on earth. Another difference in the 1830, again minor, is that verse 20 here, the last verse of the modern chapter, is actually part of the next chapter in the 1830 version. The wording is the same, however. Another point of interest in this chapter that I notice is that it appears to say that the record should be added to in every generation, just like had been done from the time of Lehi. If that is what is meant, then this means that there was no time prior to this that there was a generation of history that was skipped. Why is this important? Well, I'm thinking back to the discrepancy between the time Jacob and his son Enos would have had to have lived if the chronology of the Book of Mormon was to be taken as accurate, and Enos is to be taken as a direct son rather than, say, a grandson or other offspring of Jacob. One of the escape hatches a Mormon might try to use when faced with the extreme unlikelihood of Jacob fathering a child at 80 to 100 years old is to claim that it's like how in the Bible, son sometimes isn't a literal son, but just some male offspring, such as how Jesus is called son of David, even though they lived hundreds and hundreds of years apart. But this escape hatch would be closed and locked if every generation kept the record and added to it. There are no generations that could be skipped. That is, a hypothetical son of Jacob who is the father of Enos, so that Enos is Jacob's son, meaning he's his grandson. That would be biblically acceptable, but not acceptable in the Book of Mormon if every generation kept the record.